September 23, 1955. Villa Capri Restaurant, Hollywood, California. A young man stands outside in the lamplight, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Beside him sits a machine of silver death. Low, sleek, dangerous. Across from him, a distinguished British actor goes cold. Cold. Alec Guinness stares at the Porsche 550 Spyder and feels something dark crawl up his spine. He doesn't just see a car. He sees a grave on wheels. James Dean laughs. "I'll have this thing up to 150 by the weekend." Guinness looks him dead in the eye and says, "Please, never get in it. If you get in that car now, you'll be found dead in it by this time next week." 7 days later, James Dean was gone. Here is the story. Hollywood in the fall of 1955 was a town drunk on its own mythology. The studio lots hummed with the machinery of dream-making. Klieg lights carved shadows into the faces of gods and goddesses. But beneath the polish, beneath the glamour, there was something restless stirring. James Dean was 24 years old. He had 2 films under his belt, East of Eden and A Rebel Without a Cause, and he was already being called the voice of a generation. Kids who felt too much, who couldn't fit into the neat little boxes their parents had built, they saw themselves in him, in those wounded eyes, in that half-smile that could break your heart or start a revolution. But Dean wasn't interested in being a poster boy. He was interested in speed. Racing had become his obsession. Not the Hollywood kind of hobby where you show up at the track in sunglasses and wave at photographers. Real racing. Dangerous racing. The kind that required reflex, courage, and a willingness to flirt with oblivion at 100 miles an hour. He'd been competing in small races up and down California. Winning some, crashing in others. Warner Brothers was nervous. They'd invested too much money in this skinny kid from Indiana to have him wrap himself around a telephone pole. But Dean didn't care about their balance sheets. He cared about the feeling, the purity of it. Man and machine and mortality all compressed into a single moment of clarity. On September 21, 1955, Dean took delivery of a car that would become more famous than most actors ever get to be. A Porsche 550 Spyder. Silver with twin racing stripes, engine number P90059. He was so excited he had his mechanic, Rolf Wutherick, paint a number on the side, 130, and above the door, in casual script, a nickname that would haunt the world, a little bastard. He loved that car the way other men loved women. The handling responded like it was reading his mind. This wasn't just transportation. This was freedom distilled into steel and rubber and gasoline. On the evening of September 23rd, Dean was supposed to attend a dinner at Villa Capri, an Italian restaurant on McCadden Place where the Hollywood elite gathered to be seen and to see. He showed up late as usual, but this time he had company. Sitting in the glow of the street lights was the Porsche. He couldn't help himself. He wanted to show it off. Inside the restaurant sat Alec Guinness. The British actor was in Los Angeles finishing up work on The Ladykillers. He was older, wiser, a man who carried himself with a kind of dignity that Hollywood respected but could never quite replicate. Guinness was everything Dean wasn't. Controlled, measured, deliberate. When Dean spotted him, he lit up. He admired Guinness. They'd met briefly before, and Dean had peppered him with questions about acting, about Shakespeare, about craft. Guinness found Dean talented but scattered. A boy playing at being a man. Dean practically dragged Guinness outside to see the car, and that's when everything changed. Let's back up for a moment, because to understand what happened outside Villa Capri that night, you need to understand what James Dean was running from. Grown up invisible. His mother died when he was 9. And his father shipped him off to live with relatives on a farm in Indiana. Dean spent his childhood trying to earn love that never quite came. He threw himself into everything, acting, sports, art, hoping that if he was good enough, someone would finally see him. Really see him. Hollywood saw him, but Hollywood didn't love him. Hollywood wanted to own him. By September of 1955, Dean was suffocating. He'd just finished filming A Giant with Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson. It was going to be his masterpiece. Everyone said so. But the shoot had been long and miserable. Director George Stevens was a perfectionist who demanded take after take after take. Dean was exhausted, hollowed out. Racing was his escape. On the track, nobody cared if you were a movie star. They cared if you were fast, if you were brave. If you were willing to push past fear into that place where time slows down and everything becomes crystal clear. Dean had entered a race in Salinas, about 300 miles north of Los Angeles, scheduled for the weekend. He'd been preparing for weeks, testing the Porsche, learning its rhythms. Mechanics at Competition Motors told him the car was too powerful for someone with his limited experience. Dean just smiled and pushed the accelerator harder. The people who loved him were terrified. His agent begged him to stop racing. Warner Brothers had actually written a clause into his contract forbidding him from racing while he was working on a picture, but a giant was wrapped. Technically, he was free. Ursula Andress, the woman he'd been seeing, pleaded with him. "You're going to kill yourself in that thing," she said. Dean kissed her forehead. "We're all going to die sometime, baby." It wasn't bravado. It was something darker. Resignation, maybe. Or prophecy. Quick question. Have you ever had a feeling that you couldn't shake? A premonition that sat in your gut like a stone? Let us know in the comments. The day before he drove to Villa Capri with the Porsche, Dean had been interviewed by a reporter. They asked him about his hobbies. Dean talked about racing, about the thrill of it, about how it made him feel alive in a way that nothing else did. Then the reporter asked him about danger. Dean paused, looked directly into the camera, and said, "Death is the only thing left that hasn't been done." It was a strange thing to say, an eerie thing, like he was making peace with something the rest of us couldn't see. On the evening of September 23rd, Dean was wound tight, manic. He'd been like this for days, restless energy pouring out of him. He couldn't sit still, couldn't quiet his mind. The race in Salinas was 48 hours away, and he was vibrating with anticipation. He arrived at Villa Capri around 7 p.m. The restaurant was busy. Low lighting, red leather booths. The smell of garlic and wine and cigarette smoke. Dean spotted Alec Guinness sitting at a table near the back. He waved. Guinness nodded politely. They made small talk for a few minutes. Dean was animated, talking fast, gesturing wildly. Then he grabbed Guinness by the arm. "I'll come outside. I want to show you something." Guinness followed him into the parking lot, and there it was, the Porsche, silver and deadly under the streetlights. Dean ran his hand along the hood like he was petting a wild animal. "Isn't she beautiful? Just picked her up. I'm taking her up to Salinas tomorrow for a race." Guinness stared at the car. He didn't say anything at first, just stared. And then he felt it. A wave of cold dread that started in his chest and spread through his entire body. It wasn't rational. It wasn't logical. It was something older. Something primal. Alec Guinness was not a superstitious man. He was an actor, yes, but he was also practical, methodical. He didn't believe in ghosts or fortune-telling or cosmic omens. But standing there in that parking lot, staring at James Dean's silver Porsche, he felt something he couldn't explain. Doom. Pure, undeniable doom. Dean was still talking, running his mouth about horsepower and gear ratios and track times. He was so young, so alive, so completely unaware of the shadow that had just fallen over him. Guinness interrupted him. James, Dean stopped, looked at him. "I won't give you a lecture," Guinness said, his voice low and steady. "But I must tell you something. I have a very strong feeling about this car." Dean tilted his head, half smiling. "Yeah? What kind of feeling?" Guinness chose his words carefully. "I don't think you should drive it." Dean laughed. "Utterby, come on, man. It's just a car." "No," Guinness said firmly. "It's not just a car. Please, James, don't get in it. If you get in that car now, you'll be found dead in it by this time next week." Silence. The words hung in the air between them like a curse. Dean's smile faded. For just a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition, like some part of him already knew what Guinness was saying was true. Then he shook it off, forced the grin back onto his face. "You're being dramatic, Alec. I'm a good driver. I know what I'm doing. Guinness didn't argue. What was the point? He could see it in Dean's eyes. The kid had already made up his mind. Or maybe the decision had been made for him a long time ago. They stood there for another moment in uncomfortable silence. Then Dean clapped Guinness on the shoulder. "Thanks for the concern, man, really, but I'll be fine." Guinness watched him walk back to the restaurant. Watched the way he moved, loose-limbed, confident, young. He wanted to grab him, shake him, lock him in a room until the madness passed. But he didn't. He just stood there next to the Porsche, feeling the cold metal under his palm, and knew with absolute certainty that he'd just spoken to a dead man. 2 days later, on September 25th, James Dean left Los Angeles for Salinas. He decided to drive the Porsche instead of trailering it. Wanted to break it in on the open road. His mechanic, Rolf Utherick, rode with him. They took Highway 99 north, then cut over to Route 466, a two-lane blacktop that sliced through the dry California hills. Dean was in heaven. The Porsche handled like a dream. The engine roared. The wind whipped through the open cockpit. He pushed the speedometer past 100, past 120. The world blurred. Around 3:30 p.m., a California Highway Patrol officer pulled him over for speeding near Bakersfield, wrote him a ticket, told him to slow down. Dean nodded, promised he would. Then got back in the car and kept flying. At 5:45 p.m., as the sun started to sink toward the horizon, Dean was approaching an intersection near the town of Sholem, Route 466 and Route 41. He was doing around 85 miles an hour. Coming from the opposite direction was a 1950 Ford Tudor driven by a 23-year-old college student named Donald Turnipseed. Turnipseed was heading east, planning to make a left turn onto Route 41. He didn't see the Porsche, or, if he did, he misjudged the speed. Rolf Utherick, sitting in the passenger seat, saw the Ford start to turn. He screamed, "He's going to turn in front of us!" Dean hit the brakes, tried to swerve, but there was no time. No space, no miracle waiting in the wings. The Porsche slammed into the side of the Ford at 70 miles an hour. The sound of the impact echoed across the empty hills like a gunshot. The Porsche crumpled. The engine was ripped from its mounts. The aluminum body folded like tinfoil. Utherick was thrown from the car, his body skidding across the pavement. He survived. Broken, but alive. Dean wasn't thrown. He was crushed. Trapped in the twisted metal. His neck was broken. His chest was caved in. He died almost instantly. By the time the ambulance arrived, there was nothing to do but pull him from the wreckage. James Dean was 24 years old. He'd been dead less than 7 days after Alec Guinness warned him. The news hit Hollywood like a bomb. At first, people didn't believe it. James Dean? Dead? Impossible. He was too young, too alive, too needed. But it was true, and the world went into shock. Warner Brothers scrambled to figure out how to handle the publicity. Fable Without a Cause hadn't even been released yet. A giant who was still in post-production, they had a dead star with 2 unreleased masterpieces. It was a studio executive's nightmare and a publicist's dream. The funeral was held in Fairmount, Indiana, Dean's hometown. Thousands of people lined the streets. Girls sobbed. Boys stood in silence, hands in their pockets, trying to understand how someone who felt so much like them could just vanish. But here's what most people don't know. Alec Guinness never spoke publicly about his warning. Not for decades. He carried it with him like a secret shame. He'd tell the story in private to close friends, always with the same haunted expression. He'd describe the feeling that washed over him in that parking lot. The certainty, the helplessness. "I should have done more," he'd say. "I should have physically stopped him." But how do you stop a man from racing toward his destiny? In 1977, more than 20 years after Dean's death, Guinness finally wrote about the encounter in his autobiography, A Blessings in Disguise. The passage is brief, clinical, but you can feel the weight of it, the regret. He wrote, "I pleaded with Dean not to drive the car. I had a dreadful premonition. He laughed it off, but I could see something in his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or acceptance. When the book was published, it caused a sensation. People wanted to know. How did Guinness know? Was it psychic ability? Divine intervention? Dumb luck? Guinness never claimed to have any supernatural powers. He said it was just a feeling, an instinct, the kind of thing that happens when you're sensitive to the world around you, when you pay attention to the whispers that most people ignore. But there's another layer to this story, something darker. The Porsche itself, little bastardy, became cursed, or at least that's what people started to believe. After the crash, the mangled wreckage was bought by a man named George Barris, a famous car customizer. He planned to restore it. But strange things started happening. A mechanic working on the car had the engine slip and fall, crushing his legs. Another man was injured when a piece of the chassis broke loose. Barris eventually sold parts of the car to other racers. Look, 2 of them died in crashes shortly after installing Dean's parts on their vehicles. The man who bought the tires was nearly killed when both tires blew out simultaneously. In 1960, the car was being transported on a truck for a safety exhibit. The truck crashed. The driver was killed. The Porsche rolled off and disappeared. To this day, nobody knows where a little bastard ended up. It vanished, like it was never meant to exist in the first place. Some people say it's hidden in a private collection. Others believe it was destroyed, melted down to end the curse. A few conspiracy theorists think it's still out there waiting. But here's the truth that nobody wants to admit. The car wasn't cursed. James Dean was already haunted long before he climbed into that cockpit. Haunted by loneliness, by ambition, by a need to feel something real in a world made of plastic and lies. Alec Guinness didn't see death in the car. He saw it in Dean, in the recklessness, in the hunger, in the eyes of a young man who was burning too bright to last. So what do we take from this? What's the lesson hidden in the tragedy? Iroquois. James Dean didn't die because Alec Guinness cursed him. He didn't die because of a haunted car or bad luck or cosmic injustice. He died because he was chasing something the rest of us are too afraid to chase. The edge, the limit. The place where life becomes so intense that it stops being life and becomes something else entirely. Was it worth it? That's not for us to decide. But here's what we know. In 24 years, James Dean became immortal. 3 films, 3 perfect performances. A legacy that has outlasted every actor who played it safe. You can still see him in the eyes of every young person who feels too much, who doesn't fit. Who would rather burn out than fade away? Alec Guinness lived to be 86 years old. He had a long, successful career. Played Obi-Wan Kenobi. Won an Oscar. Died in his sleep peacefully, surrounded by family. But he never forgot that night outside Villa Capri. Never stopped wondering if he could have saved James Dean. Never stopped hearing those words echo in his mind. I'll be fine. The truth is, some people aren't meant to be saved. They're meant to be remembered. James Dean understood something that most of us spend our whole lives avoiding. We're all going to die. The only question is whether we're going to live first. So here's the question I want you to think about. If you knew you only had a week left, would you spend it playing it safe? Or would you climb into your own silver Porsche and push the pedal to the floor? Drop your answer in the comments and subscribe if you want more stories about the legends who refuse to live small. And unfortunately, they don't make men like James Dean anymore.